How's it going, everybody? Welcome to Ask Me Anything About Politics. So, if you got any questions about politics, let me know in the chat, and I will do my best to give you a great answer. There is no such thing as a dumb question, so you don't got to worry about getting ridiculed or roasted or yelled at or anything like that. This is a judgment free zone. I am just here to answer all of your good faith questions about politics. I know that politics can be really intimidating when you're first trying to get to learn about it, and so I like to make this space available to people where they can ask questions about politics and they don't got to worry about getting roasted or getting debated or judged. There were times when I didn't know anything about politics, and I was always really worried about asking questions because I was like, my friends are going to think I'm dumb, or is this all common knowledge? Should I know this already? And, I don't believe in making people feel stupid or ashamed for not knowing things. So this is what the live is for, everybody. If you got questions about politics, this is a safe place to ask it. There's no judgments, there's no roasting, there's no debating, there's no ridicule. I don't care who you voted for. I don't care if you didn't vote. I don't care if you're further to the left than me. I don't care if you're further to the right than me. I am just here to answer your questions in good faith. Eli is Sigma says Trump or Kamala. What a weird question. Now that the election is over, did you want to rephrase that? Eli is Sigma. So yeah, any questions that you got? I will answer all questions in good faith. Farnaz says, "Hi, do you think he will attack Iran? I'm Iranian and so scared of another war." Jamaica Me Cheese 17 says, "Do you like Trump or Kamala more?" Again, why are we asking about Kamala, guys? The election is over. Who'd you vote for? Democrats up and down the ballot. Chris Devlin says, "Do you like Biden?" He's fine, I guess. I think he was a pretty good president. And do I think that Trump will attack Iran? That's a really good question. So, there's this idea that we have in America of Trump being this peace, bringer. That was like one of the big pieces of right-wing rhetoric leading up to the election was like Trump is the only president. There's no new wars under his administration, and he's ending wars, and he's not about continuing wars. He wants to stop the forever wars. Blah blah blah. Meanwhile, he has done nothing but escalate tensions in the Middle East, even in his first term. So I think the thing that's concerning is I can't predict whether or not he's going to try to attack Iran. He has done strikes against Iran in the past, like he assassinated Qasem Soleimani in his first term. I don't think that he views attacking Iran as a big deal. Like, I don't think that he thinks the people that live there that they count, and so I don't think that he cares about civilian casualties or upending the government over there and the amount of stability and suffering that will cause, because they are not white people and they're not Christians, so he doesn't give a shit. And so I think that's concerning. Whether or not this is all like brinksmanship, or if he is going to get the concessions out of Iran that he is demanding, that's anybody's guess. But the thing that I think is most concerning is that at no point in discussing whether or not Trump is going to do this, are we considering whether it is the morally right thing to do? Because again, he doesn't give a shit about the people that live there. Let's see here. User a whole bunch of numbers says like Biden and Afghanistan. No, that is an inaccurate thing to say. User a whole bunch of numbers. Let's see here. Marcia says, if Donald Trump runs for a third term, can Obama do likewise? I don't think that is a good precedent to set, that Republicans are doing it, so we're going to do it now. There's some arguments about whether or not people on the left should mimic tactics on the right, and whether or not it's hardball or breaking the rules. I don't know. I tend to come down on the side of, show people that there is a difference between the parties by abiding by things like the Constitution. So that's number one. Number two is, if Trump runs for a third term, and I say if, I should just say when. The only question is, it's not if he's going to run for a third term, it's how is he going to run for a third term. And, there are a bunch of different mechanisms by which he could try to do that. He could try to, lobby the Supreme Court to make an exception. He could try to, fabricate some sort of constitutional convention to change the rules. I think it's fair to say that whatever mechanism he uses, it's not going to be changing the Constitution to make it so that anybody can run for a third term. So whatever rule they put in place, it's going to be like the No Homers Club. I don't know if you guys are any Simpsons fans on here. It's going to be like Trump can run for a third term, but literally nobody else, and especially not anybody whose name is Barack, you know? Let's see here. Should Trump send the army to Mexico to fight the cartels? No, he should not. It is not okay for America to send an invading military into a foreign nation, you know? D4V1D says, what politics are we talking about? Mostly American, but I know a little bit about foreign policy. Okay, No Dodo says, do you feel that Democrats need to stay the course with progressiveness or rally to the middle? I am a progressive, so I am always happier when the Democratic Party goes more towards my direction. I prefer the new generation of politicians as opposed to the old gerontocracy wing of the Democratic Party, so I like that. But I can't tell you if that is going to win more elections for the Democratic Party. I can only tell you that that's what I like. There are a lot of people who say that the problem with the Democratic Party is that it's gotten too far to the left. There are other people who say that the problem is that they're too far to the right. You know, they're sort of like Schrodinger's political party. They are simultaneously too far to the left and too far to the right, and also doing too much and also doing too little. So yeah, I forget if you asked like if they should or if they will. I don't think that the weakness of the Democratic Party is that they represent a big tent. They represent a wide swath of American political opinion. That's the way that political parties should be. They should mirror the population. But it's difficult. It's difficult to rally a group of people that is made up of a bunch of little groups and all have their own individual priorities. But we can make that our strength if we all work together and recognize who the common enemy is. And the common enemy, of course, is the billionaire class and the Republican Party politicians that are working with them to steal money from the 99%, steal power from the 99%, and give it to the top 1%. Westerly says, thoughts on market socialism, mixed market economy? I think that we've literally only seen mixed market economies. There is no country that is 100% capitalism or 100% socialist or 100% communist. What we're seeing here in America is probably the most capitalist and the least socialist and communist of all the economies. But, I think that we would be a stronger country and we would have a stronger economy if we turned up the socialism and communism a little bit and turned down the capitalism a little bit. Scott Trox Jones says, what is the argument the current administration is making for dismembering Doge? I don't know what the official argument is. They say a million different things that are all lies and don't make sense. So I don't really know what they're telling people. They're saying like, oh my God, there's so much waste and fraud, and the states can handle this by themselves. It'd be better if and Trump will also say like, everybody's been wanting this for a really long time, which is a huge lie. He said that about, overturning Roe versus Wade and shit like that. So I don't actually really care what their arguments are because they're always lies and they're always full of shit. So the reason why they want to get rid of the Department of Education in reality is because they want people to suffer and be desperate. If you have a child who has special needs, if you have a child who English is not their first language, if you are poor, they want you to get a worse education than people who have a lot of money, because then you will have less power, you'll be less mobile, both, logistically and economically. And that's what they want. They want you desperate so that they can take advantage of you and exploit you. LibCuck69 says, do you like Trump? No, I do not. Lumberjack Aiden says, what's a politic? Oh, it's just discussing the way that we govern countries and shit like that. That's really funny. Ballerifix says, so true. And Charlie MacMe says, that's a lie. Well, you guys can fight it out. Hardly Any Time says, control the health and education and you control the population. Yeah, that's basically true. Jim Hearn says, none of that is correct. All right, if you say so, buddy. Let's see here. Scro Trucks Jones says, glad I'm not the only one who can't get a handle on it. Yeah, that's intentional. They say a million fucking things that are all contradictory and are all simultaneously bullshit, C. Kelly says, thoughts on the Trump administration deporting Free Palestine protesters who are illegal immigrants. It is one of the most flagrant violations of the First Amendment that have happened in my lifetime. I think it is hilarious that people on the right claim to be First Amendment junkies and protectors and heroes of the First Amendment. And meanwhile, the Trump administration is literally using the power of the government to punish people for speech that they do not like, and trying to punish news organizations for speech that they do not like. It is wild. It is infuriating. It is obviously unconstitutional. It is a humanitarian nightmare. And the fact that, anybody would argue otherwise is completely bananas. Let's see here. LibCuck69 says, what's your political stance? I describe myself as a progressive. Lumberjack 802 says, Trump is a good man. That is blatantly untrue. Let's see here. Jim Hearn says, so where did you get your political science degree? I do not have a degree in political science. Baller I Fix says, you hit on the head. No, I'm not. Who Me says, why get on here and straight up lie? I don't know. Ask Ben Shapiro and Charlie Kirk. That's all they fucking do. I'm up here telling the truth. Marcia says, is DEI meant to keep minorities and people of color from upward mobility? No, DEI is the opposite of that, Marcia. DEI is meant to help minorities and let them have upward mobility, because the systems of our economy and government and Department of Justice are all sort of like inherently racist. That's the reason why there is that graduate level course on critical race theory, to sort of like show how the structures of our society are kind of like inherently racist and oppress certain groups of people. And so DEI is an attempt to counteract that and make things more fair, so that a person of color who is overly qualified for a job does not get that job in, favor of a white person who is not as qualified of that job. Marcia says, sorry, ask it the wrong way. Don't worry about it, Marcia. You're all good. I remember you from other lives. You're a regular. You got leeway. Charlie McMee says, DEI was formed in order to give jobs to minorities that aren't qualified for the job. That is a lie, Charlie. And I don't know if you are purposefully spreading misinformation or if you just got tricked into believing that. But that is not what DEI is. CXLD Bleach says, what is Trump's strategy with crashing the stock market? There's a bunch of different motivations for crashing the stock market. It's kind of interesting, where you would think that somebody like Trump, who has screamed his fucking head off about how important the stock market is and how it's a reflection of a good presidency time and time again, doesn't really seem to give a shit about crashing the stock market. He has seemed to have given a shit in the past, but he doesn't really seem to give a shit now. There's I think there's a couple of different factors there. There's number one, when the stock market crashes, it hurts the 99%. Yes, the 1% loses some like intrinsic value in their assets, but they're going to be fine. They're not going to have to worry about putting food on the table or paying rent if their stocks crash, because it just means that they can't cash out now. They just have to wait until later to cash out. Maybe their dividend payments will go down, but again, they're going to be fine no matter what. What crashing the market does do, though, is it makes it so that those people who are already rich can now buy up even more assets at a severely discounted rate, which is really good for them. They like to be able to buy stocks at a cheaper price so that when the market goes back up, they can get even richer. Meanwhile, we're not going to be able to afford to buy these stocks even at a much discounted rate, because we're all going to be struggling trying to put food on the table. That's number one. Number two is, I think that him crashing the stock market is just kind of like a side effect of wanting to have a completely isolated American economy. And I think the value of him doing that with all these tariffs is, a mechanism for corruption, where if he puts tariffs on all these companies bringing goods or materials into the country, they can then lobby him for exemptions. He did it in his first term. He's already doing it in his second term. And he likes that. He likes companies having to come to him and say, can you please write an exemption for my company for these tariffs? It's going to be really hard. I promise we'll give you $1 million into your personal trust fund, and we'll buy your Bitcoin, and we'll stay at your hotels, and we'll donate to your re-election campaign and shit like that. And then Trump will do it, This is something that seems to have gone under the radar. This one fucking dude paid Trump $2 million in order to get a pardon just recently. That guy who had that electric trunk company called Nikola. There's a little more examples of fucking grift and corruption from the Trump administration. And, you know, there's also like, to go back to the question that somebody asked about, like, what is the point of him crashing the stock market? There's also sort of like the greater idea that's like a little bit more on the conspiracy theory side of things, but that I tend to think has a little bit of validity, which is that he wants to make America weaker. Like, that is his primary goal, is to make America weaker and a worse country. It is in the service of adversarial nations like Russia that he is doing that, because he wants them to help him maintain like a dictatorship for life kind of status here in America. When the country gets worse, people in the 99% have a harder time. And so there's the potential for more chaos and division, which again is something that both he wants and Putin wants. And when that happens, he can declare martial law and, you know, cancel elections and, you know, declare himself dictator for life and say that the Bill of Rights is suspended and, you know, all judges are hereby dismissed, you know, shit like that. Adrian C says, nah, Repu license, no, the left was making America weaker. Maybe you should clean that question up because it does not make it seem like you know what you're talking about. Carlos Spenham says, do you think he can take over Greenland and the Panama Canal? He can if we don't do anything to stop him. Right now, there are only two real checks on Donald Trump. And it's not the Democratic Party, because the Democratic Party did not win enough seats in the government to actually have any power to hold over Donald Trump. So the only people that have power over him are other elected Republicans in the Senate and Congress, and the House, and the judiciary. Now, the judiciary is an interesting one because there's a chance that he would just tell them, like, I'm not going to do what you tell me to do, but he hasn't fully done that yet. He has ignored some rulings, and some rulings they're still fighting and still making the argument for, so it does seem like they have some power. But that's kind of immaterial, though, because the Republicans in Congress and the judiciary don't really seem all that interested in stopping Donald Trump. You know, the judiciary, including the Supreme Court, have become extremely right-wing over the past, decade or so because of the way that the Republican Party has managed to, basically hijack the courts by installing a bunch of far-right radical lunatics into specific seats. And also, Congress doesn't really give a shit because they like what Trump is doing, or they're scared of him. And so they're allowing him to get away with everything that's getting away with. So knowing that the only two parties that could stop Trump from invading Greenland and the Panama Canal and Canada and Mexico don't really give a shit about what he's doing or are scared to try to stop him means that the only people who can stop him are us, are you and I. And so how do we do that? We have to exercise the power that we have as citizens, and there is strength in numbers. So if we all do it, then it is a lot more effective. And that is boycotting, protesting, striking, putting pressure on your elected representatives, especially if they are Republicans, organizing other people, convincing other people to vote for Democrats, recruiting other people to join you in the fight of boycotting and protesting and striking and organizing and convincing, shit like that. Because, that's the only way that we get out of this. The only advantage that we have over these pieces of garbage is that there are more of us than there are of them. So, says, can you talk about Elon combining XAI with Tesla? I don't know too much about that, I gotta be honest. This is the first I'm hearing of it. I feel like this is one of those moves that the top 1% will sometimes do to try to like escape accountability or liability, is they just kind of like merge two separate companies and then their assets become mingled and, suddenly the Tesla stock isn't doing so good because it's attached to this other stock, or maybe it goes private that way. Like, I'm not 100% sure. Sorry about that. CT33 says, why would we want him to stop? America is getting better. Open your eyes. It is not, CT33. I don't know where you are seeing that it is getting better, but it is not getting better. Inflation is going up. Prices are still going up. People are struggling to put food on the table. The Republican Party keeps on making it so that life is more expensive, where Biden decreased the cost of medications, and the Republican Party just canceled those executive orders that said that, you can only charge this much for insulin or asthma inhalers. The Democrats also made it so that banks can't charge you more than $5 in overdraft fees. and the Republicans just voted that out of existence. So now banks can charge you however much they want in overdraft fees, and there's no Consumer Financial Protection Board. Because of cuts to USAID, we are now more in danger from terrorist organizations and cartels and diseases. You know, we don't really have USAID checking to make sure that there's no Ebola coming into the country anymore. So yeah, I don't know where you're saying that the country is getting better. Let's see here. JJVB says it's gonna fear migraine, and he said that there's more Democrats than there is Republicans. That is, you're gonna have to clean up that question because I have no idea what you're talking about. Hardly Any Time says used to be $40 for overdraft fee. Yeah, and you know there used to be not as many checks on, you know, financial institutions' powers. But then we had the Consumer Financial Protection Board. Thank you, Elizabeth Warren and the Democrats. And then people voted for Republicans, and Republicans killed the Consumer Financial Protection Board. So fuck you, Republicans. Let's see here. Strap253 says, sounds like you just making stuff up to sell your agenda. I don't have an agenda. And I'm not making stuff up. You can Google everything that I'm telling you guys. It's all fucking real. CT33 says, manage your money and don't overdraft. That's simple. Oh, I see what you're doing here, CT. You're getting blocked. That's what you're doing. You know, I don't care if you have different opinions than me, but if you ask a question, I will not block you. Be part of the conversation. Engage. I'm not here to fight. I'm not here to debate you people. I am just here to answer questions and correct some false narratives that might be floating out there in the ether because of, you know, the fire hose of misinformation that we are all plugged into via social media. Max says, what's your opinion on the possibility of the Insurrection Act being brought back due to the executive order? I think it's probably likely, but I think what's even more likely is that Trump and ICE and Elon Musk will just do whatever the fuck they want, regardless of if, you know, whatever they try to do gets ratified in the courts or not. They don't care, you know, so long as nobody's holding them accountable, so long as they hold the, you know, the reins of both the FBI and the Attorney General's office, they are not going to do, they don't really give a shit what the courts tell them they can or cannot do. You know, let's see here. Tyro Pillar, good to see you again over on YouTube. You have any stories like Raymond from the Persuaders? I don't remember Raymond's story from the Persuaders. You'll have to refresh my memory. I did just finish reading that book, and I highly recommend The Persuaders to everybody. Danger Zone MG says, wait, so what Obama did? Do you want me to tell you some stuff that Obama did? He passed the Affordable Care Act, which made it illegal for insurance companies to discriminate against people who had pre-existing conditions. So now there are people who are alive today who would have been dead without the Affordable Care Act. Let's see here. Just Stone Gilmore says, how can we prevent the waste and fraud in the future? Well, you know, you need to elect people who are actually serious about getting rid of waste and fraud, because the Republicans that are currently in charge, Elon Musk, Donald Trump, they don't give a shit about actually stopping waste and fraud. What they are doing is closing down government programs that help the 99%, and in closing those programs down, that is basically a giveaway to the top 1%, which Elon Musk and Donald Trump and all their fucking billionaire buddies, they're part of the top 0.01%. So they like it when, you know, we have less power. And so they shut down government organizations that are designed to give us more power. But yeah, waste, fraud, and abuse, like, let's elect some fucking Democrats who will, you know, force the Pentagon to pass an audit and force ICE to pass an audit, and who will close down tax loopholes for the top 1% and make it so that companies can't pay their employees so little that their employees have to go on fucking food stamps. You know, like, there's some fucking waste and fraud and abuse for you. Like, why do we have subsidies for the oil and gas and coal industry? You know, they seem to be doing fucking fine with their billions of dollars in profits, in addition to the fact that we should be cutting down on all of that shit because it's bad for our air and our fucking lungs and our fucking food, you know? Let's see here. Alex says, nice haircut, man. Thank you. It's okay. I haven't gotten a haircut that I've loved in Los Angeles since I've lived here. Dr. Warhammer says, did you see that moon dust might actually be poisonous to us? I have not seen that, Dr. Warhammer. That is not a question about politics. Hydros Incorporated, good to see you again. Why are EU countries happier and healthier than the US, than us in the USA? You know, there's a bunch of people have written entire books about this. I tend to fall on the side of they're not worried about things the way that we are worried about things, because they have universal health care and strong social safety net programs. There's also a bit more of a community, and not people aren't so individualistic in the EU. It's easier to travel, so you get to broaden your horizons and see how different kinds of people live, and you're kind of encouraged to speak different languages because you're able to access so many different places. There's a bunch of different things. Glenn Wallace says, has Doge looked at the Department of Defense for waste and fraud? No, they haven't. Isn't that interesting? The Republican Party cut the budget down for everything except for the Pentagon. Don't you guys think that's interesting? Don't you think that's weird that the administration that was supposed to stop the forever wars and stop the military-industrial complex, they cut the budget for every government program except the Pentagon? Isn't that interesting? Lee Dietrich says, how long until democracy totally dies? Lee, that depends on people like you and me. The more work that we do, the longer we have democracy for. But if we just sit around and do nothing and wait for somebody to fucking save us, then democracy dies real quick. Let's see here. SS Matthew 88 says, bro is trying so hard to not accidentally read a juice comment. I don't know what a juice comment is. Ballerific says, why we just can't get free education and free medical like Canada? Because rich people really want to hold on to their money. They're like, we want our money so badly. And we're like, well, you have $200 billion. Like, isn't that enough money? And they're like, no, I need more. And you're like, okay, well, the kids need education. And they're like, sorry, I just really want to hold on to all this money. And she's like, well, maybe if you gave us a little bit of money, we could educate all these kids and people could have healthcare and stuff like that. And they're like, no, then I'd have less money. Then maybe I'd only have $2 billion instead of 200. And that would make me so sad. My dollars and cents would be so lonely if there were only 2 billion of them and not 200 billion. Let's see here. Hardly Any Time says free medical and education is usually taxed to the middle class. I don't know where you're getting that from, Hardly Any Time. Honestly, that sounds like some rich person propaganda, because why would we when the rich people have the fucking money? Why? That doesn't make any sense to me. You're telling me that there's something intrinsic about funding Medicaid, about free healthcare and free education, that money has to come out of the middle class? That sounds like a lie that a rich person told you, my man. Let's see here. Completely Lawless says the 1% pay 40% of tax dollars. How much more should they pay? More. Completely Lawless. They should pay more. Because right now they're fucking eating caviar and lobster fucking 3 meals a day on one of their many giant mega yachts while everybody else is struggling to live. While people are working 2-3 jobs, 80 fucking hours a week, struggling to get by, struggling to put food on the table, struggling to pay rent, struggling to pay medical bills, and these motherfuckers have so much money they don't know what to fucking do with it. They're building fucking rocket ships, they don't know what to fucking do with it. So how much more should we tax them? More. A lot more than they are now. I don't give a shit that they're putting forward this percentage of the the money that's collected by the government. I don't care, because it's still out of balance. Adam Joyner says it's going to take longer than 2 months to fix what took 4 years to mess up. I don't know what you're talking about, Adam. It sounds like what you're saying is that the Biden administration messed up so much in the past 4 years that it's going to take a long time to clean it up. But that is functionally untrue, what you just said, because the Biden administration made a lot of strides in fixing the things that the Trump administration broke. And so now the Trump administration is just continuing to break more things. That is why inflation was going down during the Biden administration, and now it's going back up during the Trump administration. Hayes says, how much are the rich paying individually? Tax the rich. I agree with that. Bill Hodges says, or saving astronauts that were stuck in space. Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. They did such a great job saving those astronauts that were in space. Why were they stuck there? Is it because Boeing decided to not do their regulated safety checks? And so all their fucking spacecrafts and aircrafts are fucking, malfunctioning like crazy? Y'all are applauding rich people for solving a problem that rich people caused, If you could stop licking fucking billionaire boot for 1 fucking second, you'd realize how much better your life could be if we would just tax these pieces of shit, Carrie says, these corporations profit off of the hard work of their employees, but don't even pay them properly. Completely agree with that, Carrie. Hardly Any Time says, you didn't realize what I'm saying. If we set up health and education like Canada, the wealthy still don't pay. I still don't know what you're saying then, Hardly Any Time, because you're saying it's like... You're saying this like there's something about funding free healthcare and free education that the rich people just aren't going to pay for it somehow. Like, please explain this thinking to me. Because there's nothing intrinsic here. You know, we can fix the system of our economy. We can fix the government to be different than it is. We can fix the tax code to be different than it is. We just have to actually elect politicians that are going to do that instead of these right-wing fucking pieces of shit who only give a shit about cutting regulations for giant corporations and cutting taxes for people that already have fucking multiple mega yachts and are eating lobster and caviar 3 meals a day. Let's see here. We can, but it's still the rich that control. That's not true, Hard Lady Time. Like, that's the whole point of the fucking government, is that it is our way of protecting ourselves against the billionaire class. That is what the thing of the government is. And, you know, yes, the rich have a lot of influence over the government, but we can change that by voting for different people and using the levers of power that we have as individual citizens, organizing, protesting, boycotting, striking, putting pressure on our elected representatives. Like, that's the entire fucking point. Let's see here. Paul Lockhart says, and you can't tell me all the Democrats, Republicans aren't the rich. I mean, mostly Republicans are the rich. There are rich Democrats, but yeah, it's mostly Republicans. And if you look at what Republicans do and how much money they get from the billionaire class versus what Democrats do and how much money they get from the billionaire class, it's night and day. Republicans really are doing the bidding of the billionaire class. They are working together because then the billionaires give them a ton of money for their campaigns and they give them cushy jobs when they leave office and shit like that. Yeah, it's fucking night and day, man. And I can argue this a million different ways. You tell me anything, I can tell you exactly what bullshit right-wing rich person propaganda it was that told you that and give you the actual truth of what's going on. Let's see here. Sizzle says immigration before fixing our own problems. I don't understand why immigrants aren't a problem. They don't commit crimes at the same rate as naturalized citizens. They pay more in taxes than they take out in social services. So yeah, why? Farnaz says, have a Q. Why did only Kamala and Trump get the chance? Why it's always only two well-known ones? It's not always only two well-known ones. You know, if you're asking me why it was two people who were already like established in politics versus why it's only two candidates, you know, generally, the answer is because we have a two-party system. And if you add more parties into it, then those parties become spoiler candidates. So if you had a really popular Libertarian Party candidate, he would take votes away from the Republican, and it would be easier for the Democrat to win. If you had a really popular Green Party candidate, then they would take votes away from the Democratic candidate, and it'd be much easier for the Republican to win. But yeah, you know, Obama was a relatively, you know, fresh face on the political scene, and he, you know, was elected president for 2 terms. Trump had exactly 0 experience in government, and he was elected twice. So yeah, I'm not really sure what you're talking about there. Truth Seeker says it's all rigged. That is not true, Truth Seeker. Bailey Renee says Republicans knew they wouldn't win without Trump. LOL. Yeah. Kyle Strug says if you are going to do this, then at least know what you're talking about. I do know what I'm talking about. Jose Gamino says, honestly, how do you think our president is doing? Terribly. He's a fucking piece of shit, and he is ruining the economy. He is making people's lives harder. He is destroying our government from the inside out. It's like rot and grift and corruption. It's fucking unbelievable the way that he is throwing every human being under the bus except for him and his billionaire buddies. Anthony Murphy says, how much say do poor Americans have a say in politics? They have as much as effort they are willing to put in. Rich people, with their advantages, is that they can put as much money in to, you know, elections as, you know, they want, and then they get a whole bunch of access that way. Poor people, they have to organize, and it takes more energy and more hours. But if you do that, then poor people end up having more power than rich people because there's so much more of us in the 99% than there are in the top 1%. Kyle Strug says, spreading misinformation. You know, Kyle, you haven't asked a question in a real long time, and all you're doing is calling me names, so you're out of here. Hardly Any Time says, gotta love Citizens United. You know, Democrats are proposing a constitutional amendment to undo Citizens United. So, if you do not like rich people having such unfettered influence in our government, then maybe y'all should vote for Democrats in the future. P. Diddy is out of here. All right. Let's see here. Bill Hodges says, define poor. I don't know what metric people use for defining poor. I don't know where the poverty line is, or if people think that you are only poor if you are under the poverty line or whatever. I think it's easier just to talk about the 99%, because then we are talking about the working class, the poor class, we're talking about the middle class, we're talking about everybody except for the billionaires. Let's see here. User, a whole bunch of numbers, says, what do you think of the AUW supporting tariffs? I don't know what the AUW is. Is that a union? Let's see here. Lee Dietrich says, do you support standing up against our enemy within April 5th, 2025, your state capital or Washington? I do, I am a big fan of people exercising their constitutional rights to protest and boycott and strike and put pressure on their elected representatives. So yeah, guys, big protest on April 5th. Make it happen. Go fucking protest fucking Tesla dealerships and stuff. Don't set them on fire. That shit's illegal, but protesting is legal at the moment. Margaret Oliphant says, what do you think of national speed rail system? I am for it. I think we should have high-speed rail. I think that we should have 80% fewer roads, and I think we should just have more trains. That is, trains that go across the country and, public transportation within cities and shit like that. Right, Jamaican Me Cheese says, Vance 2028, MAGA. Vance is not going to be the nominee in 2028. So long as Donald Trump is alive, there will never be a different candidate for the Republican Party for president. User, a bunch of numbers, says, do you like Trump? No, I do not. Darren says, stop lying. I am not. Let's see here. NF says, is Trump really going to enact martial law on April 20th? I have not seen any stories that say that he is going to do that. So I wouldn't worry about that specifically. Let's see here. Timothy Price says, do you think taxing the rich more will help our economy? Yes, it will. Timothy Price, think about the economy like a closed rain system, So like we here on Earth, we have these closed ecosystems where rain falls down from the sky into lakes. The lake trickles down into rivers. The rivers go out into oceans. The oceans is where the water evaporates and goes back into the sky. The clouds travel back over to the lake, and then it rains back down again. What billionaires do is they take water out of that system and they hoard it. And that starves everything, so that means less rain, that means less water in the rivers, that means less water for, growing crops and shit like that. It means the ocean becomes more, salty, salinated, etc. And the same thing happens with, billionaires hoarding their wealth in offshore accounts and shit like that, It doesn't trickle down. Trickle down is a fucking lie. Having that money available, it does a lot. In addition to reducing the power that billionaires have, when they have less money, they have less power. And so they are not able to exercise their unrestrained will against us, the 99%. It is easier for somebody to, break labor law when you have $200 billion than if you only have $500 million. When you don't worry about getting fined $1 billion for doing illegal shit, if you have $200 billion, you'll probably obey the law more if you have less money because you won't have as much money to fight it. Let's see here. But yeah, then all that money gets to go into government programs that help lift people up out of poverty. Those people then are going out and spending money, which makes the economy stronger. It is what Biden talked about, which is a bottom-up economy where, instead of trickle down where you give all the money to the top 1% and then they buy yachts and shit like that and then the rest of us all fucking die of starvation, when you give money to poor people, they go out and they spend it on things that they need, like food and medicine and clothing and whatnot. That is how you grow the economy, because then those stores get more profitable and they get to hire more people, and then those people get more money and then they spend more money, et cetera, et cetera. Timothy Price says, can you give an example of a more thriving economy in another country that taxes the rich more? We don't have to go to another country. We had it here in this country after FDR. The top marginal tax rate was 90%. So I don't remember where the cutoff was, but it was something like every dollar that you make over $10 million gets taxed at 90%. And that is the America that all these ding-dongs keep on wanting to go back to, is one where there wasn't so much fucking income inequality. And our economy was much stronger back then. Let's see here. Alice says, Christian nationalists have a lot to do with this weight when Trump taxes the churches. Do you think he's going to do that? I don't really know. Tyro, good joke. I really like that. Reagan ruined everything, says Bailey Renee. I completely agree. Robert Castro II says, Tyro, you asked earlier about vets that fought for the idea that immigrants are welcome. I am one of them, 11 years in the Army, and even deployed to Afghanistan. Thank you, Robert Castro. I appreciate you. All right. User a bunch of numbers says the UAW is the Union Auto Workers, and they support tariffs. P.S. They supported Kamala in the campaign. I don't necessarily believe that just because the union likes something means that is better. Like there are a lot of union members that supported Trump in the past election. There is some value and validity to the unions liking a candidate because, if they say that a candidate is good for unions, then unions are good for America, then that probably lines up. The fact of the matter is, people have been falling for propaganda a lot recently. People have been falling for misinformation a lot recently. So, I worry that these union members are falling for it. I worry that they're, drinking the Fox News MAGA Kool-Aid if they are saying that they are in support of these tariffs. Let's see here. Greggy Poo says, why is MAGA so blind to the truth? So everybody is blind to the truth. I have been guilty of this in the past of calling Trump supporters stupid or uneducated, or, people call them ugly and say that the women can't do their makeup correctly. I don't know if that's productive. And also I think that it is unfair because there are plenty of people on the left who get conned and tricked regularly. There are 8 million people on the left who got tricked into not voting in the past election. And then when you ask them why they didn't vote, they say things that are obviously bullshit. Both parties are the same, voting doesn't do anything, nothing ever changes. There were people who thought that Trump would be better for the people of Gaza than Kamala Harris, and that is fucking unbelievable bullshit. There are people who were upset that prices went up during the Biden administration, even though those price increases were caused by the Trump administration. So yeah, everybody got tricked. The only people who didn't get tricked are people who that read the news. Those are the people that vote for Democrats by a factor of 80 to 20. Let's see here. Guava Cake says they listen to their church, the news, their friends, etc. When you go against your friend's church, yeah, there but for the grace of God go I. If you were born into that neighborhood, going to that church, getting your information from those friends on Facebook, you'd probably fall for that shit also. Ron Nascimento says, if they keep these tariffs, it will essentially become a tax for the 99%. That is accurate, Ron. Classic says, MAGA cares more about Trump than they do themselves. Yeah, kinda classic. I'm with you. They are voting against their best interest, but they don't think they're voting against their best interest. They think that they are voting for a better, stronger American economy with fewer immigrants. There's different factions within the Republican Party. There's people that just got tricked by the propaganda. There's straight up fucking racists who are like, I don't give a shit if you are fully taking a shit on my face, so long as you are, doing mean things to a brown person. That is cool by me. And then there's rich people who are like, yeah, fucking fuck everybody. I don't give a shit. You're taking care of us. That's great. Let's see here. Pookie says AIPAC runs both parties. That is not true. Let's see here. Pookie, you need to ask a question or you're going to get out of here. Lady Lobberty says, how do we get through to MAGA, or are they hopeless? No human being is hopeless, and convincing you that convincing others is impossible is part of the goal of adversarial nations like Russia and, piece of shit billionaires and, the Republican Party assholes like Musk and Trump and Vance and all those fucking ding-dongs. You should read a book called The Persuaders. It was written by a fella whose first name is Anand and whose last name I have never been able to pronounce. He's an excellent author and journalist. He also wrote a book called Winners Take All about how all billionaire philanthropy is bullshit. And he just basically wrote this book about how persuasion happens and how it is the goal of the billionaire class and adversarial nations to make us feel like people's minds cannot be changed. It is also their goal to sow division and chaos. So anytime you are being convinced that a person on the right is a piece of shit and that represents everybody on the right, or you're being convinced that there's a person on the left who's a piece of shit and that represents everybody on the left, keep in mind that could potentially be a Russian bot that is pretending to be an asshole and being a jerk to you just so that you have a negative opinion of your other people in the 99%. There are definitely people out there who have taken the bait and become the shitty version of themselves that, Russian troll farms have been fabricating for a while. But it doesn't do you any value to assume that is a real person. It is much more productive to just assume that everybody who you disagree with on the internet is not a real person. Because, then you are not fighting. Then you are not thinking negatively about your fellow Americans. And if you really want to start doing some work of convincing and talking about politics with people, do it in real life. Do it face to face. Then you're actually knowing that you're talking to a real person who could potentially get convinced. And you can't do any convincing on the internet. It doesn't matter how many times you post or retweet things or how many cool videos you make. It is just too easy to manipulate the social media algorithm if you have a lot of money and power and influence, which the billionaire class does. And also these platforms are owned by billionaires. So they're obviously going to skew whatever information is out there away from, convincing people. Pookie says, with the spying via Epstein-Maxwell, should we consider Israel an adversarial nation? I don't know what you're talking about as far as like the Epstein-Maxwell spying. I don't know if I would go so far as to call Israel an adversarial nation, but I do think that we need to reassess our relationship with Israel because they have been a not good ally for a long time. I do not believe that we should be continuing to send them money and weapons because they have been guilty of war crimes. And we already have a law on the books that says that we are not allowed to give money and weapons to countries that are doing war crimes. Hamas, it should also be said, is also guilty of doing war crimes, but we are not currently sending them money and weapons, so that is not an issue. Mika Janderson says, what are your thoughts about Trump threatening Iran? I mean, he did this in his first term. He did it with everybody. He did it with North Korea. He did it with China. He did it with Iran. And part of it is bluster, but I think that part of it is part of a larger goal of setting him up for, conquest, for taking over our neighbors like Canada and Greenland and, shit like that. I also don't think that he really views the people of living in the Middle East as real people because they're brown people, and he's a solid fucking racist. So I don't think that he cares about, inciting tensions in the region. He already assassinated an Iranian general named Qasem Soleimani in his first term. There's absolutely nothing stopping him from escalating things further because he doesn't really give a shit, Let's see here. Nick says, question, what exactly is Trump doing with the Smithsonian museums? So part of the Republican right-wing / billionaire conspiracy is they need to change the culture. And part of that change in the culture is erasing the history of civil rights advancements and, things that, oh my God, this is a great African-American scientist who did this fucking great thing. And, this is a great woman who did this great thing. They want to erase all of that so that they can recreate the culture in a way that helps them, politically and, accumulating more cultural power as well. The billionaire class has figured this out for a long time. They're like, yeah, every movie that gets made about the common man sticking it to a billionaire, that is bad for us. Every, movie about Remember the Titans. Oh, look at this. We got black kids and white kids playing football together. Isn't that great? That hurts their goal of being able to exercise more of a hierarchical racial system here in America where white people are at the top and everybody else is at the bottom. So yeah, that's part of their goal. This dude, a real fucking right-wing piece of shit billionaire named Leonard Leo, who has started an entire institution about this where they're funding movies and, podcasts and TV shows and everything in order to sell a culture that is more friendly to their agenda. And, they've been doing this for a long time. I suspect that TV shows like Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous and Cribs were created in order to lionize people who are wealthy and not think of them as what they are, which is leeches and fucking parasites who are stealing our labor, turning it into fucking gold, and forcing the rest of us to fucking starve in the gutter. Classic says, do you think Trump will get impeached for a third time? He will if we are able to take back the House. Because he's already done wildly impeachable things already. But Republicans were literally never impeach Donald Trump, either because they like what he's doing, they like the illegal things that he's doing, they like the unconstitutional things that he is doing, or they're scared of him. They are scared of a primary challenge, or they're scared of violence from his followers, because he has made it very clear that he supports his followers doing violence against his political enemies. Let's see here. Jacob says, liberal meltdown continues. I mean, I don't know what you're talking about. Do you see me melting down? I am just soberly and candidly telling people how shitty Republicans and billionaires and the Trump administration is, and Elon Musk. So yeah, does this count as a meltdown? Or was it a meltdown when fucking Republicans fucking sacked the Capitol on January 6th? Was it a meltdown when all these Republicans were fucking praying outside of fucking polling locations and crying their eyes out about, oh, we gotta find more votes for Trump in 2020, you know? Mad Chad says, you have been melting down for months. I mean, if you say so, man. I'm not really here to fight with you about who is melting down and who is not. Mika Jander says, do you think he'll declare martial law? I think he wants to, Mika. I don't know what the timeline is. I don't know if he's going to wait for something to happen or if he's going to manufacture something. He wants people to be suffering so that we are more incentivized to take to the streets. The people on the right really like it when there are left-wing protests, because then they get to go and start fights and break windows, and then they blame that on the left as well. And then, the cops come in and they start fights with the protesters, and, then Trump looks at this and he goes, look at all this chaos, we got to declare martial law. So yeah, I don't know what his specific plan is or what the timeline is, but I know that he wants to. And so unless we do the work of stopping him, he's eventually gonna. Jay Clee says, who hurt you? Oh, I don't know. Many people. Arrowhead Prince says, Trump still hasn't passed any legislation. But hey, you own the libs. I mean, he hasn't passed any legislation, but he's still dismantling the government illegally and unconstitutionally. XX Iceman XX says, what impeachable offenses has Trump committed? I'm not up on the news. Sorry. That's okay. XX Iceman XX. That is literally what this live stream is for. You can ask me anything about politics. So, the definition of an impeachable offense is actually a little bit squishy, because in the articles of impeachment, it says high crimes and misdemeanors. But that is completely up to the interpretation of whoever is in the House. So during the Clinton administration in the 90s, the Republicans were in charge, and they decided that Bill Clinton lying about having an intern as his D counted as an impeachable offense. But those same Republicans saw Trump blackmailing Ukraine in order to, gin up fake dirt on a political opponent, or, instructing his followers to go do a coup at the Capitol. Those Republicans did not believe that that was an impeachable offense. But, what are the things that he has specifically done? He has violated the emoluments clause, which basically says that presidents are not allowed to make money off of the office of being president. He did it in his first term. He is currently doing it. All the shit that he's doing with Bitcoin and not divesting from his properties. So if you are like let's say we'll create a nation that doesn't exist, like the nation of, we'll say, what's it called? We'll say Wakanda. We'll say Wakanda wants to bribe Trump, so they have all of their delegates go stay at Mar-a-Lago, and then they tell Trump, we all stayed at Mar-a-Lago, and he goes, okay, cool, well, what do you want? And they're like, nuclear weapons, and he's like, cool, here you go, shit like that. So that's the emoluments clause. There's also, he has violated I forget the name of it, but it's something called like the Congressional Appropriations Act, which basically says that when an organization like USAID or the Department of Education exists, you have to fund it the way that the funds have been appropriated. You cannot just fire people unilaterally. You cannot cut down the staffing of that agency. You can't destroy that agency. It has to be an act of Congress that does that. Him and Elon Musk are doing all of those things completely illegally. And so that is fully a constitutional, that is an impeachable offense as well. He is violating, people's civil rights by having ICE round up people indiscriminately. ICE has rounded up people who are here legally, who are veterans, who are citizens who have been here for generations. Some of these people have been flown to an El Salvadorian concentration camp, and they have provided exactly zero evidence that any of those people have committed any crime or that they're migrants. They could just as well be citizens. Like, we have no fucking idea. They have been ignoring the rule of judges. The judges have been saying you got to do this, and they've been saying, you go kick rocks. All of those are wildly impeachable offenses, but Republicans will argue that they are not. Signalgate is fucking an impeachable offense. I mean, he wasn't directly involved with that, so maybe that's a little bit more of a bank shot, but the fact that he isn't calling for resignations is basically an impeachable offense because it is, you are not... I'm actually going to backtrack on that because I think it is too much of a stretch to say that Signalgate is a impeachable offense. Let's see here. Mika Janderson says, how do you see him being removed? Also, will the military keep their oaths? That is an open question, Mika, and it is completely terrifying to think about. Look at the people that Trump has fired. He has fired the head of the Joint Chiefs. He has fired the heads of all the various branches of the military with the intention of putting people in charge who are just loyalists, people who will do whatever he said, regardless of if it is illegal or unconstitutional. If he says shoot American citizens, they'll say, yes, sir, daddy, how many bullets would you like? But it's an open question whether or not the chain of command will hold. If the people from the very bottom of the military to the very top, there are bound to be some people in there who do not want to do what Trump says, who want to uphold their oath to the Constitution. But how many of them are there? Do they have the strength of character? Do they have the bravery? Do they have the knowledge to be able to stand up to what these people are telling them to do? That's an open question, And as far as how do we remove him from office, we would have to take back the House and the Senate if we wanted to impeach him. We would need 67 seats in the Senate, which would be very, very difficult, but not impossible. People sort of talk about the political wins and polling as these things that are set in stone, where these districts are red, so it is unlikely that they will go for Democrats. These states are red, so it is unlikely that they will go for Democrats. But that does not mean it's impossible. It just means it would take people like you and me doing a lot of work in order to get a Democrat elected to those various seats. But it's hard. We have a better chance of taking back the House, which means that there's a very good chance that Trump gets impeached again. But if we don't get 67 seats in the Senate, then the Senate cannot vote to remove him from office. It would just mean that he got impeached for a third time. Other than that, we would need to win the 2028 election. Those are the only really two mechanisms that we have. And I'm just gonna say this again, just in case anybody didn't catch me. We can win 67 seats, 68 seats in the Senate. We can. It'll be really hard. It would take a lot of man hours and woman hours. Progressive. It would take a lot of people doing a lot of work for a long time. But it's possible. Everything in politics is possible, even if it hasn't been done yet, That's why when people say to me, I'm going to do a protest vote because I live in a blue state and my vote doesn't really matter. And it's well, it doesn't really matter until it does. We have a couple of million vote window, a couple of million vote cushion for, California going red or Texas going blue. But it's not impossible. That's why I tell everybody to vote, regardless of if you are in a deep red or a deep blue state, your vote means something. It always matters, even if it has been diluted by things like the Electoral College. Susie's says, is there a way votes in Senate and House could be made private? I suppose there could. I don't know of any... any Senate or any rule in Congress that says that those votes have to be open to the public. I don't know if that's in the Constitution or not. That's a really good question, actually. I don't know. My gut is telling me that if Republicans wanted to change that, then they would. Neutsche Gamer says, opinion on Trump's third presidency. Well, Noiche, you know how I feel about Trump. You know I think he's a piece of shit. You know that for months now, I have been telling you that it is his goal to die in office and be declared president for life. So obviously, this is not a shock to me, and to anybody that it is a shock to, I would invite you to begin reading the news, because I think that would be a real beneficial thing for you to do. But yeah, it's unconstitutional. It's there for a reason. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So yeah, it would be bad for America, but Republicans don't give a shit. They just like whatever Daddy Trump tells them to do. Let's see here. Bruce Walker says, what about Trump saying tariffs selling more U.S. autos? The problem is that even cars that are made here in America by American companies, they need components or parts that are made in other countries. So the prices of even American cars are going to go up. Even if a car is, an American company, sometimes American companies don't make their cars in America. So yeah, as far as I know, the only company that is getting away from these tariffs unscathed is Tesla. Don't you think that's interesting? Don't you think that's interesting that the guy who gave Donald Trump $250 million to win the election is the only car company that is going to not have to raise prices because of tariffs? Don't you think that's interesting? I don't know. Seems like Trump said he was going to bring costs down. Doesn't really seem like he's doing that. It should be concerning to everybody. You know what I mean? Trin Dalin says, if they change that a third term, okay, could Obama run? Well, it depends on the mechanism that they use. Trin Dalin, there's a joke that I referenced at the beginning of the show from The Simpsons where there's a thing called the No Homers Club. It's a little bit like that, where whatever mechanism he uses to try to run for a third term, it's going to be just for him. Maybe it will be for other Republican presidents. Maybe it will be for his shitty kids, should he be able to, die and leave the presidency to them like a fucking dictator that he wants to be. But it's not going to be written into the Constitution that anybody can run for a third term. Even if it was like that, they would put in there, in parentheses, unless your name is Barack. Nansen says, Tesla is completely American. What's he going to do? Place tariffs on his own country? I don't know what point you're trying to make there, Nansen. Let's see here. Big Twin says Obama should announce his candidacy for 28th and Supreme Court would have to rule. But that wouldn't make a difference if they tried to pass a special, waiver for Trump to run for a third term, or if he declared martial law and canceled all elections or shit like that. Toro says, if they remove FEMA, would states have to rely solely on their own funds for disasters? I believe so, Toro. Yeah, that is part of the Republican philosophy. It's every state for themselves, every country for themselves, every man and woman for themselves. It is the logical end point of hyping up a purely individualistic society. Yeah. FEMA, what all of us using our tax dollars to help various states that are suffering from, natural disasters, seems like some real commie socialist shit to me. Let's see here. Noichi Gamer says, I think Obama would lose to Trump. I do not, Noichi Gamer. Obama is one of the most effective political communicators in history. He is an extremely popular former president, but that's a hypothetical that will never be. The exact same Supreme Court that will allow Donald Trump to run for a third term will not allow Barack Obama to run for a third term. Daniel Smith says, what is the segregation executive order that True just signed? If you're talking about the one that I am aware of, there is boilerplate language in every contract that we give to private companies that the government hires to do specific jobs. And part of that boilerplate language says that you cannot be a racist, segregated workplace if you are going to get hired by the government. Trump and his people took that language out of the contract. So now, hypothetically, there could be a company out there that has a policy that's like, we only hire white people, or has a policy that's like, everybody middle management and up gets to be white, everybody middle management and below is a black person. that company would not have been able to work for the government in the past, but now they can. And I do not see any justification for doing that besides more evidence that Trump is a fucking hardcore racist. Nan said, you said the only car company not being tariffed is Tesla. Thus my comment, you don't think as much as you think. No, I mean, he wrote rules about tariffs that coincidentally only don't affect Tesla, which is the company owned by the guy who gave him $250 billion for his campaign. It's as simple as that, man. You don't need to fucking look for clues like fucking national treasure here to figure it out, man. It's like blatant corruption. It's blatant favoritism, crony capitalism shit, Shanti Flytrap says, how are they just ignoring court orders? If the people do that, we'd be detained. Why aren't they? Because they are powerful, and the judiciary is nervous. All of the rejections that the Trump administration has done to judicial orders so far have been relatively mild and light. They have said things that are full of bluster in public, but their lawyers are still doing the work of trying to appeal those decisions and get them to the Supreme Court. If the Supreme Court tells them at some point that they have to do something like a hard stop and then they don't, then that's where people start getting really nervous. Like, what, do we not have a court system anymore? Does it not work anymore? Then, that's pretty dark. So that is concerning. But yeah, all the mechanisms that the judiciary would use to enforce their various rulings they exist under the purview of the Department of Justice. And the person who is in charge of DOJ right now is a woman named Pam Bondi, and she is just a full-on Trump loyalist. Like, she doesn't give a shit about the rule of law. She will just do whatever Trump tells her to do. And so, the judges could try to send out the U.S. Marshals to arrest these people who are not obeying their orders, but then Pam Bondi could just tell the U.S. Marshals, don't do that. Diego Vargas says, when did we become an oligarchy? Trump wants to take us back to the Gilded Age. It's actually worse. Income inequality is worse now, Diego Vargas, than it was during the Gilded Age, which I think is hilarious because the Gilded Age was literally named after how bad the income inequality was, and it's worse now. When did we become an oligarchy? I think it's been slowly boiling for a long time. I think that Citizens United, which is the Supreme Court decision that found that, it opened up all these avenues for political campaigns, unlimited political campaign donations. It made things like super PACs and dark money possible and legal. I think that's where we really started becoming an oligarchy, because then these people started putting so much more money into elections and putting millions and millions of dollars into campaign ads that did not have to be approved by the candidates. They could just be a rich person spreading fucking propaganda on national television, Maddie Dubs Music says, is quality of life also worse? Yes, it is. Prices are going up, so people's qualities of life is going down. Bob Marley says, those are some blue eyes. Thank you, Bob Marley. I appreciate that. Let's see here. Giradaras. I see you, Tyro. I see you over there. Anand Giradaras. I'm going to work on that. Okay, let's see here. Dan Blackwood says, the widening of the wealth gap under Reagan that became de rigueur for modern GOP presidents. I would agree with that, Dan Blackwood, but we had so many opportunities where we could have changed course. I think it was Citizens United that really it was the nitro, basically, of the Reagan administration. All the puzzle pieces were put into place during the Reagan administration, and Citizens United was basically just like, the billionaire class flooring it. Let's see here. All right, let's see here. Looks like comments are slowing down a little bit. So, I'm going to start wrapping things up, everybody. Thank you very much for all of your questions and all of your comments and all of your gifts and your likes and your shares. I appreciate any support that you guys can give me as I am doing this project of trying to correct false political narratives and get people more engaged and, get more people voting and voting for better politicians. If you can only support me the free kind of way, like likes and shares and telling your friends how great my my live streams are, and that everybody should watch them. I appreciate that. If you want to do the financial kind of support, you can do that also, but you don't have to. I would much rather you put food on your table and pay your rent than send me a couple of nickels and dimes. But if you want to, you can. I got a Patreon. You can join. It's on my website, jarrettberenstein.com. I also have a store, jarrettberenstein.com/store, and you can send gifts on Twitch and TikTok and YouTube. If you have any questions that I was not able to get to today, you can hit me up. My DMs are open. You can also email me through my website, jarrettberenstein.com. That is where you can also find my tour and streaming schedule. I am a stand-up comedian, and I'll be on the road in a couple of weeks. But yeah, my normal streaming schedule is 11:30 a.m. Pacific time on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. I often add a Monday, and I often start early because I just really like doing these. And yeah, just my heartfelt plea for everybody to do the work. That's how we stop this. That's how we get out of this, is if we all do the work. And, if you're a regular, then you know what the work is. The short version is you got to talk to people. You got to convince people. You got to vote. You got to get other people to vote. You got to make sure that people that you know are not falling for these lies, this bullshit propaganda that just helps the billionaire class and the Republican politicians that are working hand in hand with them. There are great groups that are already doing this work. Indivisible, Run for Something, Vote Save America. You can join them. You can start your own political action group with your buddies. But yeah, it's just about talking to people in real life, doing the real work of convincing, of recruiting, of organizing, of protesting and boycotting and striking, of hounding your political representatives so that they will do their fucking job and stop Elon Musk and Trump from fucking dismantling our government and making all of our lives fucking worse. Ezra Klein just came out with this book that everybody's arguing about whether it's good or bad. It's called Abundance, and it's about how the Democratic Party needs to be messaging from a position of abundance and needs to be legislating from a position of abundance. And, he makes some points about how Democrats have in the past not been able to get certain things done because of regulations and whatnot. But I think that the main point is important. It is that Republicans and billionaires and Donald Trump and Elon Musk, they want you to believe that these cuts are necessary because there's just not enough to go around. We need to defund your kids' school, and we need to defund the Federal Aviation Administration, even though planes are fucking falling out of the sky. And we need to cut regulations for these companies because the reason why food costs so much is because of all these regulations. We gotta cut it. So yeah, your food's gonna be less safe to eat, and your air is gonna be less safe to breathe, and your water's gonna be less safe to drink, and your kids are gonna have to worry about getting shot at school, but we have to all just tighten our belts a little bit because we're in a rough spot here, gang. But here's the thing, guys. It's a fucking lie. Because these motherfuckers are dining on their fucking mountains of gold 24/7. They are living the fucking life in their fucking penthouses apartment, not having to worry about money for a fucking second. They're going to these private hospital doctors, spending fucking billions of dollars to do, they don't have to worry about fucking shit, guys. They can send their kids to fucking private schools. They can get fucking private tutors while your fucking kids are sitting there in classes of fucking 60 kids per teacher. And they got no resources, they got no money for fucking new books or computers or any shit like that, man. There's not scarcity. It is a false narrative that the right and the billionaire class has created to make you feel like, to justify the cuts that they are doing to the things that you need. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, they are cutting these things. They are making things more expensive because they have told you, they are lying to you about that being necessary to make sure the economy runs well and make sure that these companies can lower their prices and shit like that. It is a lie. It is bullshit. The money is there. It is sitting in fucking offshore accounts. These billionaires are just fucking sitting on it. They're just letting it, they just want more. They got fucking greed disease. So they just want to accumulate all of it. And they don't really give a shit about us. We can all fucking die of starvation and exposure for all they're fucking concerned. They want us to live in a world where we're so fucking desperate that we just become like slaves. We just become like new serfs to them. Where we gotta work fucking 80 hours a week so that we can survive on the fucking scraps that fall off of their mouths while they're fucking shoving food into their fucking gobs, So yeah, guys, don't believe it. Don't believe the fucking scarcity lie. All right, let's see if there's any Let's see if there is any further questions. Add a shirt to your shop that says "Do the work." I like that idea, Tyro. Maybe I will. Tax the rich. Completely agree with that. QN says, like we have the last 4 years. That's rich. Yeah, QN. So I don't know if you're here in good faith or not, but yeah, the last 4 years was the Biden administration doing their best to try to fix all the problems of the Trump administration. And they were wildly successful. They brought the Trump inflation from 9% back down to 2.4%. They were revitalizing small towns with good, safe, clean energy jobs, well-paying energy jobs. They capped the cost of insulin. They capped the cost of asthma inhaler. They lowered prescription drug prices for seniors. The first infrastructure bill in over a decade, so there are bridges that are not going to collapse on your fucking family because of the Biden administration. He walked the picket line. The unions were becoming stronger for the first time in generations. So yeah, you can miss me with that shit. But again, I don't know if you are here in good faith or if you are just here to say no to whatever I say or call me a liar. The Ilma says, what can we do about school shootings? On a government scale. I think, we need to regulate the gun industry. That is the number one priority. I think forcing everybody who owns a gun to have a license, forcing everybody who owns a gun to mandatory gun safety classes, insurance, so that if anything happens with your gun, you are then liable for that. The same way that if you drive your car into a fucking crowd of people, that you have to have insurance for your car, War Turtle says, just like getting a license to vote, your vote can kill somebody. Like if you voting for Donald Trump is killing people. It has killed people already. But it is not a one-to-one the way that buying a gun can kill somebody. So yeah, do I think that getting a license, people should have to get a license to vote? If you make those licenses free, I don't give a fuck. Make them free. The problem I have is forcing people to pay more money to be able to vote. It's what's called the poll tax. And, it was a thing that we did to keep black people and poor people from voting in the past. Now, I think that everybody should be able to vote. Republicans think that if you're black or a woman or poor, that it should be harder for you to vote. I don't think that. Democrats don't think that. So, yeah, if you want to make everybody get a license to be able to vote, make the licenses free. Go for it. Go crazy. Let's see here. Scott Clower says, if guns made us safe, this would be the safest country in the whole world. Completely agree with that. Pasky67 says, why are MAGA folk allergic to facts? So here's the thing. And I've said this a million times. I'll say it a million more times. The billionaire class and the Republican Party have made their goal to spread as much misinformation and propaganda as humanly possible. And it is affecting all of us. So yeah, we can talk about, MAGA, being fact-averse or, not being able to tell what's bullshit and what's not bullshit. But the fact of the matter is, the Republican Party does not have a monopoly on getting conned and getting tricked. There are a lot of people on the left who also got conned over the last 4 years. The number of creators that I saw that said both parties are the same, nothing ever changes, Trump will be better for the people of Gaza, the Democratic Party could have protected Roe in the past, they just chose not to because they wanted it for political football, blah, blah, blah. Don't vote. If you don't vote, it'll send a message to the two parties that we want better. The number of people who fell for that shit on the left is the reason why we lost the 2024 election. So yeah, I would love to sit here and, do the pile on of, aren't the Republicans fucking dumb? But, they are a victim of exactly the same kind of information that we are the victim of getting. If you were born into that family, going to that church, watching that news channel, getting your information off of that specific social media, you would probably fall for that as well. So I try to encourage people to do this radical empathy where we we recognize that there but for the grace of God go I. And that it is the goal of Trump, Republicans, the billionaire class, adversarial nations like Russia to make us fight amongst ourselves. They want the center left fighting with the progressive left. They want the right-wing voters to think that their enemy is trans kids and poor people and immigrants. And what I'm trying to do here is say, hey, every time you think that it's the move to make a video making fun of a Trump supporter or you think it's the move to call a liberal a cucktard, just remember that there's a billionaire cashing a check right now off of you doing that. And he is so fucking happy that you're mad at somebody else besides them. They're so fucking happy when we're yelling at Nancy Pelosi or fucking Chuck Schumer, you know, or there's a person on the right who is focused so hard on immigrants. They're just like, oh, it's the immigrants that are the problem. It's the fucking immigrants, man. They're just like, can't see anything except for fucking immigrants. And meanwhile, there's a billionaire fucking ripping this dude off, is got his hand in his pocket, just pulling cash out. You know? So, yeah. Not to be too, you know, on my moralistic high horse, but, yeah, that is my vibe there. Mucklots13 says, I'm an outsider, but isn't the Second Amendment there to keep potential tyrants in check? If it is, Mucklot, it is not doing its job, because the Trump administration is trying to dismantle our system of checks and balances. He's trying to become a dictator god king. And I don't see all the fucking Second Amendment ding-dongs out there using their guns to stop that. So yeah, and also, if that is a thing that someone thinks, I would say, I do not think that any gun that you can legally get is going to match up against the United States military. So yeah, that is a propaganda narrative that we all need guns to protect ourselves from the tyranny of the government. It is inaccurate. It is not bearing out in reality. It is inaccurate in that to scale. You know, like you can have a fucking 1,000 guns, and the government has a drone, and you're done. Is that system of checks and balances working? It has been for a while, Frog, but it isn't now. It is not right now. It is not during both Trump administrations, because the Republican Party has forfeited their authority of checks and balances. You know, right-wing Supreme Court judges have forfeited their job as part of the checks and balances system. But yeah, it was 100% working. You know, it had flaws. It definitely needed some adjustments, but it was working. You know? Dan Blackwood, the U.S. military has weapons we haven't even thought of in creative fiction. Yeah, that's a possibility. All right. Any good last questions to get into? Los Chargers S. How is Trump becoming a dictator? Dan Blackwood, that was maybe a bit hyperbolic. Yeah, you know, I don't have evidence that it was hyperbolic or not. So, all right. So you asked me how is Trump? How is Trump becoming a dictator? S. Los Chargers. So, it's two things. Number one, he is trying to, actually it's more than two things. There's a bunch of things. If you look at, there are people that study fascism and fascist regimes, and they have created a list of things that fascist dictators do in order to become, you know, like the next Mussolini or Hitler or Stalin or whatever. And Trump has done and is currently doing all of these things. Attacking educational institutions, attacking the free press, consolidating power, getting rid of checks and balances. You know, he's done all of these things. It is part of what Doge is doing. What Doge is doing is fully illegal, and yet the Republicans in Congress are letting that happen because he purged the Republican Party of anybody who wasn't a full MAGA Republican. In addition to that, he is acting like a dictator. He is ignoring what the judges tell him to do. He is, you know, signing executive orders that have no legal basis. Executive orders, there's very specific legal standards by what is allowed to be an executive order and what isn't. But he is signing executive orders that are like dismantling the Department of Education and getting rid of birthright citizenships, which is not a thing that an executive order can do. But he is dressing for the job he wants. He is acting like a dictator in the hope that everybody will just have a mass psychosis and be like, I guess he's allowed to do that. He's doing it, I guess. You know, it's that thing of, you know, don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness, you know. All right. Thank you for your questions, everybody. Thank you for your shares and your gifts and your attention. I will see you guys tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat channel. Have a good week, everybody. Let's all do the work. Let's all be there for each other. That's how we get out of this, guys. Take care. Bye-bye. Goodbye, 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 goodbye.